after whatever happened last season, what is considered a successful season for IU football this year?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, guys? It is Thursday, August 18th. This is Locked On Hoosiers, your one and only daily one-stop shop for everything IU athletics. I'm your host, as always, Jacob Rude. Want to thank you guys for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every single day. Look, it was a weird year last year, and it's been a weird build-up to this season for IU football, which kind of begs some questions, especially about what is considered a successful season. It's something I mentioned earlier in the week, said we were going to do a podcast on it. Not only are we doing that, but I brought in my good friend, hopefully yours as well, who was on the podcast last season. And it was an entirely different vibe as we talked about IU football. But Ben is joining us today. Ben, man, what's just we'll start off kind of broad. What's just kind of your feel, your sense of where IU football is after what has really been a wild 365 days?
Thanks, Jacob. It's good to be back here. Good to be talking with you about this again. Last year when we did this, I think we both were predicting about 8-4 for IU football. Obviously, season did not go as planned, suffered a couple early losses, suffered a couple early injuries, and by the midway point of the season, it really felt like any momentum that we had gained in 2019 and 2020 had really gone out the door. There were some really demoralizing losses in November. Big loss to Rutgers at home. That was the one where all the shirtless guys were hanging out in the end zone. They were like the only fans in the stadium on like a really cold November Indiana day. And then, of course, there was the 37-point loss to Purdue in the bucket game. And so after that season, new offensive coordinator comes in, new defensive coordinator comes in, and a lot of changes. Well, Mike Penix transferred out. We'll get into QB competition in a bit, but it really seems like any momentum that had come out of the 2019-2020 season is no longer there. And as we get into the 2022 season, there are a lot of question marks about Indiana football going forward and what the approach is to this season.
It's so weird because it just felt like we had shed a lot of those demons and gotten the monkeys off our backs, and just as we thought we were breaking free, we get kind of drugged back into what we thought we'd escaped in last season. Any number of kind of backbreaking losses. I think the Iowa game, Tom Allen talked about it, just the way it happened and the nature of it was just demoralizing, deflating, and that kind of set a tone, unfortunately, for the season. I do want to talk about, as I alluded to start, about what a successful season is. Before we do that, though, like something you'd kind of mentioned is just the approach Indiana's taken heading into this season, and I think it is a little bit tied to having lost all this momentum and the way last season ended. It's just the secrecy with which they're doing basically everything. When it comes to the quarterback battle, we can briefly touch on that because that one feels obvious that you would want to keep it in secret. And I think just about every program is going to handle the quarterback battle roughly the same that IU would. Do you have any qualms kind of specifically to that with how IU is handling it? And Tom Allen said that there's a good chance the staff will know this week, at the end of this week, who's going to be the starter, but obviously the public isn't going to know until right before that Illinois game. Do you have any issues with how they've handled that?
So in terms of the QB battle, obviously with Penix transferring to Washington, they bring in Connor Bazelak. started at Mizzou for the past couple seasons, so he has experience going up against some SEC teams. And then the other competitor in this QB battle is Jack Tuttle, stalwart of the program, been around there, I think, since 2019, 2020, originally a transfer from Utah. Anyway, I don't think this is uncommon to have a QB battle like this. I mean, unless your team has CJ Stroud or someone who's an obvious starter. But and I think we'll have an idea of who's going to be the QB1, but before the Illinois game on September 2nd. But I do think if you're confident Tuttle's the guy, then why do you bring in a transfer like Bazelak in the offseason? And which makes me think Bazelak's going to be the starter unless Tuttle has really upped his game, overcome injuries from last season. That's sort of my read on it. It's interesting too, as you alluded to, this secrecy surrounding the offense. It really seems like they're keeping a lot of stuff under wraps, and I don't know if that's just because the offense was so down last year, but I do think it might be good for the team just to give the fans a little taste of what to expect come September 2nd before we get to that first game.
Yeah, and it's just been really odd the way they've protected the ideas of what they're doing offensively. You can look back, we mentioned it last week, just even when Big Ten Network goes to IU for their kind of tour around the campuses, and it was just kind of an innocuous question about I think it was to Jack Tuttle, just asking how he's adapting to a new offensive coordinator, and his answer was, well, I can't give too many secrets away, which just is like, it's pretty clear that there's been kind of this edict almost gone out to the whole team, the whole offense, to just reveal absolutely nothing, which, I mean, I can kind of see the pros and the cons to it. Like, IU has almost wholesale changes offensively, aside from that offensive line. Assuming Connor Bazelak starts, I think just about every position, save for DJ Matthews, if he starts, will be a new starter. So on one hand, like, do you really need to be this secret when there are so many unknowns on this offense? But on the other hand, I guess if you double down on it and they don't know what any scheme you're running along with the players you have, I guess you can take the other team by surprise. But to me, I think all this secrecy they're like playing with or using, does it feel like it's putting a lot of pressure on this Illinois game to come away with a victory?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that game is really going to set the tone for the season. Illinois obviously has long time Hoosier foe Brett Bielema as its coach. He's in his second year now. They went, I believe, 5-7 last year. Won one of the ugliest games I've ever seen against Penn State, a 9 overtime 20-18 thriller. But I mean, I also think Illinois in year 2 of Bielema, they're still trying to put everything together. So I really do think it puts a lot of pressure on this first game, and it makes me wonder, like, what could they be what could they be premiering for the first time that's going to be out of the ordinary. Obviously, other teams will have film on Bazelak from his year starting at Mizzou. Walt Bell has been an OC for other Power 5 programs in the past. He was most recently the head coach at UMass Amherst. That's a tough place to win games. I don't know how much you can glean from those, but they will have an idea of the offense he runs, or if Bazelak's the starter, what he can bring to the table as QB. If Tuttle's the starter, what he can bring to the table as QB. So I mean, they do talk a lot about secrecy, but the other teams will know a little bit, at least, of what to expect.
Yeah, it's just an interesting approach they've taken to that with that secrecy as well. No spring game that we've talked a lot about, and I think a really I disagree with that approach of not having a spring game and trying to build up some of that momentum, as you said at the start that they lost. But I mean, that's well in the past at this point. It's an interesting approach heading into a season that is going to be, I mean, to use that same word, going to be a very interesting one for Tom Allen and IU football. I want to talk about what success looks like this season and how much different it is than when we had this discussion last year. Before we dive into that, though, imagine this: you're hanging out with some friends, putting back a few drinks. A few become a few too many, and as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill somebody. Everyone knows the risk about drunk driving. The results are tragic and often deadly. How often does that however, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're ready to drive after a few drinks, think again, play it safe, and plan ahead to get a ride. It's the era of Uber. It's very simple, guys. It only takes one mistake to change your life and someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Big shout out to everyone for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every single day. The Ultimate College Football Preview is here, a 7-episode preview with college experts, local team experts, and the Odyssey College Football Insiders. It's everything you need to be ready for the college football season in one spot. Search for Ultimate College Football Preview on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. I don't imagine IU is going to be mentioned in an Ultimate College Football Preview after a 2-win season. You mentioned that when we had this discussion last year, we both predicted 8-4. I do believe is what I predicted, but I also said, I believe in a separate podcast, that I'm still at a point where a bowl game felt like a successful season. That was a little more ominous maybe than I realized, but now having experienced what we did last season, what does success look like for IU this season, in your opinion?
I think, to me, it's getting the team back to the point where we win a couple conference games would be nice, but really just to be back to the IU that is competitive with these Big Ten East teams, and putting the scare in them for a bit, which we really didn't last year. I think by the end of the season, no one was scared to play IU, and I mean, at least for a while, even before the 2019 season, I would say pretty much every season between 2013 and 18, there was at least some scare. There was that chaos team that IU was often called, especially, coming into Bloomington, there was always this fear from other teams that were nominally better than us that, IU was going to make this a game or going to make things interesting, and something crazy could happen because that's Indiana football. The other team would likely walk away with a win, and they usually did, but at least Indiana was going to make things interesting, mix things up, and give the team give the opponents a real battle well into the fourth quarter. And, that's what I'd like to see again, is some of those types of battles. I think part of why last year was so demoralizing is we were having these losses of 5 or more touchdowns. I believe we lost, what was it, 54-7 to Ohio State, something like that.
Yeah, and that's a generous scoreline too.
Yeah, I mean, OSU is going to be awesome again. They always are. That game's in Columbus this year. Can throw that one out. But I mean, other than that, our cross division games this year: Illinois, Nebraska, and Purdue. On on the surface, all of those seem winnable, especially with all the talent Purdue is losing. I mean, if you look at the schedule, I mean, we talked about the importance of that first game against Illinois, but I mean, it's true that game could really set the tone. If you win that, then maybe you're thinking, this could be, this could be a bowl team this year. I mean, if you look close enough, you could, and you don't think Nebraska is going to go back to its form where it used to be. You could see 4-1 on the schedule. You could see maybe 6-2 going into the bye week in the end of October. But I mean, that's if you really are optimistic, you really want to be generous. I mean, on the other hand, I think to me, I'm thinking a 4-8 season. I want to say Vegas has our win total at 4 right now, and that seems about right.
When I did on Tuesday's episode, I went through and kind of predicted win-loss for every game. I landed on 5-7. Win the first 3 games, beat Rutgers, beat Purdue is the 5 wins. There are toss-ups in there. Nebraska, I think, Maryland as well, potentially, as games that IU could potentially come away with a win. But, I mean, that's already mighty thin margins when you need 6 wins, obviously, to get into a bowl game. Back to kind of the point you made at the start of that was kind of building this momentum and playing tough. Is there a win total that IU needs to reach, you think, for it to be successful? If they go 2-10 again, but they're playing Ohio State and Michigan State tough, is that good enough? Do you think they need to get to 3-4 wins for this to feel successful again?
Yeah, I think they need to get at least a couple of conference wins in there. I agree that the Purdue game being at home is an opportunity at the end of the season. I'd probably say Maryland at home as opposed to Rutgers on the road. That could be a win. And yeah, as we said, Illinois, I saw this morning the line in that game is IU's favored by 4.5. So, they're favored to win that one at home. I do think though you need 2 or 3 more wins than last year to really keep this momentum going, and then show it's a bounce back. Show that Allen has made some good coordinator hires, and we have some players in place for the upcoming year. I'm pretty sure this past recruiting class was the best in school history. So, really something for them to something more to get excited about as well, with those recruits starting to make their way onto the team.
Yeah, and the last kind of point on this, you mentioned Tom Allen and the hires he made. Is there a scenario you envision? This is such a drastic kind of mindset difference than last year, where we were imagining 10 wins. Now, is there a scenario where Tom Allen's on the hot seat at the end of the season?
I think unless it really goes bad, and there's a loss to Western Kentucky there at home, and things really go off the rails, then yeah, I think it's a possibility. But that being said, Tom Allen has brought the team to the most success it's had since the Bill Mallory days of the early 90s, and I think he should probably get at least a couple years, including this one, to rebuild the team and rebound, especially with the recruiting class coming in. So I think unless things are, it's another 2-10, 1-11 disaster season, I really think he's earned the opportunity to bring this program back. There could be changes, the Big Ten, college football in general is changing so much. I wouldn't be surprised if divisions are abolished after this season,
Yep.
because I think Pac-12 already has, and I know other conferences are planning to get rid of their divisions. And I think I read somewhere that the Big Ten like pulled all the schedules down for future seasons. So
Mm-hmm.
there might be an opportunity where IU is not playing Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State, Michigan every single year. And obviously with UCLA and USC coming into the fold in 2 years, regardless of what we think of that, that's going to change the schedule up too. So a lot. College football is changing so much every year that who knows what the the general groundwork of the sport will look like going forward. And so I think unless this season is an abject disaster, I think he goes 3-9, 4-8, but there's like some momentum. Maybe a win in the bucket game. Maybe you play Michigan close for most of the game. Yeah, you gotta. I think you gotta stick with it at this point. Also, I think it's a huge buyout in Allen's contract.
Yeah, that part is probably not. I haven't discussed it enough. I believe it's $25 million after this season. It's a big number. I remember seeing reported. So he's not getting fired this year, but that seat could get a lot warmer. To me, I think just improvement from last season is all I'm really looking for, and improvement on the field and how they're playing, improvement in competitiveness, improvement in win total. Just try to start showing that you can gain that momentum back. And as I said on Tuesday's episode, if IU does go 5-7 with the Old Oak and Bucket, I think that's a almost objectively successful season, based on how poorly things went last year. We've been all doom and gloom now a little bit. Let's look forward to some things we're excited to see for this upcoming season. Before we jump into that, betonline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, even golf, even college sports, obviously, as well. You mentioned the line during that last segment. BetOnline has Indiana as a 6-point favorite against Illinois for opening night. Who are you taking? Are you taking Indiana with the points on that one?
6 points. That seems like a lot to me,
Yes.
especially
Yes.
with what we don't know about the team, with them breaking in this new offense and just the secrecy around it. I think 6 is a little high. Longtime Indiana Twitter stalwart Chronic Hoosier tweeted this morning that the line was 4.5, so that's what I was going off of. But that seems like more. That seems more of a line where you can a little more generous, and maybe if that line keeps going down to 3.5, then I'd be tempted. But I do think it's going to be a close game. I think that's how both these teams kind of play. I think it's going to be a close, low scoring game. If there's an under, I would take the under.
Yeah, the line on BetOnline has kind of consistently trended upward. I think it started around 4.5, and continued to go up. It was just 5 last week, I remember, as I looked at it for BetOnline's read. But BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. I agree, 6 points is a lot. I don't think I could take Indiana on that. Over under though is 47.5. I could agree
Love,
that I
love
I
the
would
under.
take I would take the under there for advising you on any bet from that. Let's end on a positive note. I'll start off with you. What's something, could be a player, could be anything attached to the team. What's something you're looking forward to watch with Indiana football this year?
Um, got the I got a few guys I'm looking forward to seeing play this year. Taiwan Mullen,
Yep.
he's been a stalwart at cornerback for years and years at IU. He's still on the team. He'll be one of the leaders of the defense. Cam Jones at linebacker. He's going. He there have been some articles about how he's really stepping into that leadership role that Micah McFadden had last year at linebacker. So be curious to see what he does. And then lastly, I think this is in general, just the wide receiver core. I'm very interested to see what happens there. First of all, DJ Matthews, as you mentioned, coming back from an ACL tear. Also, Donovan McCullough, who was, I think, the highest rated QB prospect in IU history, has switched to wide receiver. So I'll be curious to see what he can do there. And then AJ Barner is going to try and fill in Peyton Hendershot's shoes at tight end. So the receiver core is a question mark, but I think there's I think there's some potential there, especially if Basilak, or Tuttle, whoever's the QB, really gets in a rhythm.
It feels so peak IU that the highest rated quarterback in the program's history spends one season at quarterback, where he actually played probably more than anyone expected him to play, and then promptly switches to wide receiver. I think McCauley is a great enough athlete that it will work out there, but it just feels like such an IU moment where we got maybe I think it was, I have it pulled up here, I think like 7 games of him playing quarterback, where you saw the promise, and then he's like, all right, time to play wide receiver. So
Yeah,
uh,
it really does feel like that. I didn't realize he played in 7 games last year.
yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't either until I'm glad I had that up, because it didn't feel like it. He didn't play toward the end of the season. I believe they were basically trying to protect him from injury going into the off season. But yeah, it was a interesting season for him. I have him down. All those names you mentioned, I had down. Taiwan Mullen he's on preseason All Big Ten teams. He's if he's healthy, I think he's going to be arguably the top cornerback in the conference this season. And one of the best. I mean, we saw a few years ago when he was healthy, he was one of the best in the nation, first team All American. So I had him at the very top of the list. Cam Jones, I thought, has been a bit underrated just because he's played next to Micah McFadden, one of the kind of best players in probably the modern era of IU football, especially defensively. So I think he's been a little underrated, and we may get to see him kind of step out of that shadow this season. DJ Matthews was about the only exciting thing IU's offense had going for it last season. It was a bummer that he got injured when he did, because he was providing so much for IU's offense at that time. I had Donovan McCauley down as well, who it's gonna be interesting. I was surprised when the initial two deep depth chart came out. At least based on that, he's fighting for a starting quarter or wide receiver position. It was Javon Swinton or Donovan McCauley or Anderson Kobe at one of those receiver spots. So it seems like even if he doesn't start, that he's gonna be on the field as a wide receiver 4 snaps this season, which is wild. Also, Tom Allen mentioned that there would be play sets or plays where he would be under center, or maybe not necessarily under center, but at quarterback this season as well. So just kind of how they use him is going to be interesting to see. The one name I had down that you didn't mention is freshman that we've talked a ton about, Deshawn Mccalla, and what he's going to be able to bring on that side of the ball. The highest, I believe it was the highest rated recruit Indiana's ever had. at the very least, one of the highest Indiana's ever had. And again, referencing that Big Ten Network piece they did last week, they singled him out as someone that looked great and was getting to the quarterback, and someone that was really making an impact. And the more you hear about him, the more it sounds like he's going to be able to get on the field right away. Based on 247 Sports, he is the highest rated recruit Indiana's ever landed. So I'm really excited to see what he can do. And really, in general, just the defense as a whole, like especially under Tom Allen, that's been such a strength. I mean, how excited are you to see this defense in this secondary with not just Taiwan Mullen, but Jalen Williams, Devon Matthews? I mean, how excited are you to watch this defense that brings so much back this season?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. I mean, defense has been a staple for the Hoosiers under Allen, obviously. It was interesting. The former DC, Charlton Warren, left for UNC, and so they brought in Chad Wilt as the new DC. He's, I believe he's originally from Indiana, but he was the D-line coach for Minnesota. But Allen is calling plays again on the defense. Mm-hmm. And we know what to expect from a Tom Allen defense at this point. You know, this is a defense that really brings pressure, wants to create turnovers, wants to really get at the opposing team and really cause havoc and disruption. And I really, the one part of this team that I'm feeling good about it is the secondary and the linebackers, as you mentioned. Deshawn McCullough. That'll be really exciting to see him on the field this year. And obviously great cornerbacks and safeties coming back. And we hope that group stays healthy. I think the defensive line, both lines really still kind of a question mark for for IU, but that's something that hopefully we can really spruce up this year, because obviously on the offensive line the protection wasn't there, but on the defense, when they talk about the defense for IU, it's a lot of talk about the linebackers and safeties. I believe it's a 4-2-5 defense, but not as much talk about the front four.
Yeah, that defensive line has actually, I don't want to say necessarily a weakness, but certainly has not been an area of strength for Tom Allen in the last couple of years. And the one really productive guy they had last year, Ryder Anderson, is no longer on the team. He's in the NFL, I believe, with the Giants. So it's going to be interesting to see how they adjust. And to that point, how Tom Allen moves back into the defensive play caller mode, and hopefully that doesn't impact him negatively as a head coach in any way. That seemed to be why he stepped away from being the defensive play caller before. So hopefully he's able to kind of organize himself and organize things a little bit better this time around, and create some of that havoc that the buzzword he loves to use, and what Indiana didn't really have any of last season. So that defense could really be a fun unit to watch this year. Ben, thanks a ton for coming on once again. I hope this season ends a little bit better than the one we forecasted last year. And then thanks to all you guys for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. Now, know what your team is up against across the Big Ten with Locked On Big Ten. Every day, host Nate Dickinson and the local experts of Locked On take you across the Big Ten in 30 minutes. Make Locked On Big Ten your second listen, Locked On Big Ten. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at @LO_Hoosiers. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave a quick rating and review if you have not already. But most importantly, guys, have a great Thursday, and LEO.